Join us on Taking Care of Business. This week, we're talking about agents flying to private yachts off the coast of Greece to sell properties for over 100 million dirhams.
We're seeing a lot of movement in from Europe because the demand is there and the train is rolling and no sign of stopping.
We're talking about why thousands of millionaires are moving to the UAE this year.
For them, it is that cash on cash return.
6,700 millionaires.
Wow, that's eye-watering.
Massive. Talking about close to 50,000 off-plan property transactions.
It was one launch every 25, 26 hours. Now we're down to 18 hours. In there might be 120 or 130 different developers.
And we're giving you the heads up on which developer and which development to go with when there are close to 200 developers in the Dubai property market at the moment.
Well, we look at Expo City. Expo City is the city of the future. So that's going to be a really hotbed down there.
Welcome to this week's episode of Taking Care of Business, where backed by popular necessity is a man of fine Irish pedigree and Fintan.
And Fintan.
Talking about all things off-plan this week, Fintan. So welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much.
I thought in a week where we've had one of our agents has flown to Greece to go and visit someone on their private yacht to sign an SPA for a property at over 100 million dirhams.
Yeah.
It was an apt time to have a bit of a review of the first half of the year in the off-plan market and just catch up, really, see what you've seen and see how you've seen the market.
It's crazy to think that we're already at the end of the first half.
Yeah.
It's just been phenomenal. It's just relentless, I suppose, is the right word to use. And we're seeing that with the data that's coming through, but we're also seeing it on the ground with the influx of people moving to Dubai as well.
I think, what was the population increase so far this year?
Well, the increase, I think, here's the Dubai Statistics Centre. As of today, we have 3.74 million and 815.
So I remember it's only, I feel like it's only a couple of years ago in a podcast, it might be longer, where we were talking about 3.3 million population.
Yeah.
So it's really shot up a lot over the last few years. I think 50,000 approximately in the first half of the year people moved to Dubai. So there's no slowing down.
But the momentum is there, and that's going to continue. We're seeing that with the business setup. We're seeing with which we'll come on to a little bit later, but the Henley migration or millionaire migration report that's come out for the UAE, it's topped it again.
6,700 millionaires approximately coming to the UAE this year.
It's crazy, isn't
Huge.
it?
Yeah.
So that's where you're seeing all these luxury projects coming into the market, these new master communities coming, because the demand is there. And the train is rolling and no sign of stopping.
Well, I've got a question on master communities in a moment, but just to read out some stats, just for everyone to be aware of, really. So total off-plan sales in the first half of the year, 45,271. Completed units, so handed over units, I guess, 20,652 so far this year, which is a 50% increase on H1 in 2023. And with June is the month with the most completed units with 4,642.
Yeah.
Huge figures. Launched units in H1, 47,792 units launched in the first half of the year. February was the most active unit for developers in terms of launches. And again, an 18% increase in half one of 2023. So year on year. H1 off-plan sales volume increased by 55% versus 2023. And for the first time in probably quite a few years, in the second half of last year, off-plan outpaced the secondary market in terms of sales. And I think it's safe to say it's carried on in the first half of this year. So I'm going to come on to the master community question in a minute. But the obvious first question is, where are all the buyers coming from?
Well, we've got one thing we have to say here is we've got so many different segments and we can't really generalize. So you have your domestic buyers, and we've got a lot of clients actually now that we're finding here want a piece of the action. They've benefited from the increase in property. Some people we're selling in now the villa communities, downsizing. They've got that money. They're not going to put it back into their home country. Whereas once upon a time, the priority was buy the property at home.
Yeah.
Now it's a case of buying it here. Because they're on the ground, whatever industry they're in, they're feeling good. All the right noises are being made, the business setups, but they can also see while you're driving around Dubai, the government is reinvesting in infrastructure all the time. So that's the domestic buyer. They want a piece of the cake.
I'll just add to that, sorry to interrupt. I think what people are also seeing is units that were launched maybe 4 or 5 years ago and the capital appreciation that's shown in the run up to handover. So now, like you're saying, once people have got more of a disposable income or money to invest, they're now looking at the off-plan market and think, well, if I get in now, in 3 years on handover, I'm probably going to make, if I want to sell it, I'm probably going to make a tidy capital.
For them, it is that cash on cash return. You know, but what we're seeing now is probably a little bit more of a savvy investor. The speculator is not going in there just for pure speculation. They're looking at, okay, am I buying something that's going to give me a good rental income over the longer term? These new projects coming into the market with newer amenities, better designed, they're going to have better occupancy going forward. They're going to get people will be moving in here. They're end users, less available units for rent, and then you're as a landlord, you're in the marketplace to dictate how many checks you want. So that's, I suppose, from that side, they're very, very attractive payment plans. With some of the smaller private developers, they're getting a lot of that attention now, because you can still get a payment plan for 50% down and 50% on completion.
Do you think that's their play for the smaller developers as a way to attract investment away from the bigger boys? Try and make it more of an affordable payment plan?
Yeah, it has to be. There's been some developers in the market for the last, as long as I've been here, 9 years, that have always had that 1% per month payment plan. And that's been their magic sauce. But now if you're entering into the market, I heard a term recently, and it was reputational risk. The bigger, larger, established developers, there is no reputational risk. They have delivered, EMAR have delivered time and time again amazing and master communities. So they can command 80% during construction or even 90% during construction. Whereas the newer players in the market, and there's so many new developers coming into the market here from around the world as well, they have to give, their proposition has to be better. Whether that's a better payment plan, whether it's a better product, whether it's a better amenities. The locations are going to be very similar to each other. So how do they differentiate their product? And I think, like you just said there, is that domestic investor as one category, capital appreciation is, yeah, that's great, but they're thinking more longer term. But they want to also have that option on handover. Can I make a premium if I put 50% down? Can I make a nice return on my cash? Pull it out then and reinvest and go again.
And this is what we're seeing at the moment, and you'll know better than me, but people who maybe did invest 3, 4, 5 years ago, who are taking handovers, are doing that and going straight back into the market because they've had that positive experience to go again on a fresh development.
Listen, I mean, I wish I took my own advice 4 years ago. I mean, the clients that bought, and again, we've got to remember a new developer. Majid Al Futtaim 4.5 years ago, was a new developer in Dubai. The name is known. So they didn't carry the reputational risk. But we've seen with the Elans, we've seen with the Harmonies, we've seen with everything in Talal Al Gaff and Arabian Ranches, Cherry Woods, all of these places, the market has given a huge capital uplift. But the return on cash investment, return on equity, wow, that's eye-watering.
Massive. So go on, I interrupted you. So we've got the domestic buyer. Where are the international buyers coming from?
So different segments. We took the luxury market, as we've mentioned there with the Henley report. That does its own thing. So we're seeing a lot more branded residents. We're seeing like master communities being built for that category. But that is really a small segment of the marketplace. We know 65, 70% of the transactions in the market are falling under 3 million. So who's coming in? So we look at, in that category, we're looking at 3 million dirhams is 750,000 euro. We're seeing a lot of movement in from Europe, because they can come in here and even for 250,000 euro, they're getting a really good one-bed apartment on a 50-50, 60-40, 40-60 payment plan that's going to deliver them a 7% net. Now, what will they get for that 250,000 euro in their home country, in a country that has economic issues, political issues? Not an awful lot. And they're not getting the same kind of return. So that's your international in that sub 3 million. Interesting, we're seeing a lot more interest coming in from North America, Canada, US. The Asian market has always been there, but we need to knock this perception where a lot of people have been saying for the last number of years, oh, this has been driven by the Ukraine-Russia situation. No, those buyers are not there now. And Dubai has always I suppose not always, it has put itself in a position over decades of work and investment in infrastructure to capitalize when these situations come up, as we're seeing in the Eurozone or the UK.
Do you think with the US and Canadian investment particularly, the US coming off the grey list helped to give more confidence?
Oh, absolutely. We look back at the Urban Plan of 2040, and where does Dubai want to be by 2040? It wants to be a tech hub in the world. It wants to be a financial player, a big player in the world. It wants to be at the top of AI. So where the ambition is and the vision is, it wants to be a financial hub on the likes of Singapore, London, etc. Would you bet against that?
No, and I think there's very few countries who are, if any, as ambitious as the UAE, and certainly none that communicate their ambition and set out a plan and a strategic growth plan to get there. So,
we have elections happening across Europe at the moment and UK, and politicians are nearly afraid to put up their manifesto for the next 5 years. In the middle of coming out of COVID, this was our plan for 2040.
Yeah.
This is D33. This is the program of events for the next 10 years that came out at the start of 23. And one by one, these program of events, whether it's the metro investment we're seeing across Dubai, and that'll lead to the corridors and the areas that are good for investment, tick, tick, increasing the level of compliance across the industries. And the evidence of that is we've come off the grey list.
So coming back to my master plan question that I referenced earlier, and I'm a huge fan of this, where do you think the strategy to focus on greener communities, more wellness hubs, wellness centres, cars like Gaff Woods that launched recently, there's no sort of fully pedestrianised. Where has this drive come from? Is it purely a demand thing that this is what buyers have been after? Or?
Okay, if we go back to, you got the developers, but we look at the leadership within the UAE. And do you remember a number of years back, there was this Minister for Happiness was introduced. So to attract people to come to Dubai and retain them, it's not just enough that it's making money and not paying tax. That's not enough. There has to be a wellness factor to it and a happiness for families to stay here and retain them for longer. So I think this has come from also post-COVID, where people spent more time in their homes, in their houses, in their communities. And I think that period of time, we've said this before here on the podcast, that this has given developers time to kind of step back and see what direction do they want to go. So when I've said this before, I live in a community called a sustainable city, very good. Capital prices should be going up. It's the best place to live. But there's elements of there where we have car-free zones, lower emissions. Lower emissions means no noise pollution. You've got your gym, your cycling track, your running track. Even for families, they've got the duck pond and the petting farm for the small children. Now, when you go down there and you see people walking down and spending time there, I think you visited there with your family.
I'm a big fan. Yeah, huge fan. We go all the time.
So when people come down there, this is normal everyday life that sometimes you don't get here in Dubai. We take this for granted at home that we can go for, like Gaff Woods, a walk in the forest. So
how often I go there, actually, this is interesting because I noticed on your Instagram yesterday you had a business meeting in the cafe.
yeah.
So I actually sent you a message saying, convenient place for business meetings.
Convenient.
So, yeah, no, I'm very familiar with the community.
So I think you've got Aldar stepped into the market. So the point with sustainability, it was about mobility, and sustainable city was all about DEWA and lowering your electricity bills, as well as trying to the net carbon thingamajokey.
Yeah.
That escapes me at the moment. Now you've seen Aldar come into the market with a joint venture with Dubai Holdings at the end of last year with Haven, then the Athlon. And at the heart of it all is mobility, car-free zones, sustainability. They're actually launching now in the next 10 days, less than 10 days, the apartments within the Haven, which was the townhouse and villa community called Verdes. Really good buy, prices starting from 1 million on a 60-40 payment plan. But in here now, we're seeing the bar being raised for communities, for master communities.
I think you are right in terms of the government direction, because I'm just thinking back now, Dubai 3030 has been running for many years, probably a decade or more. might be fact checked on that, but
Did you say fat checked? or
I'm constantly fact checked by my wife. But that's been clear. The cycle tracker Al Qudra, which is constantly being extended now.
Yeah.
I was riding my bike on there 10, 11, 12 years ago. So there has always been, and even the Tour de France is at the moment, which the UAE team is a really strong team in there. So there has always been this drive from the government for mobility, for a healthy lifestyle. So I think I hadn't thought of that angle before, but I think you're right. It does fit in.
What they want to do as well is, when you understand about a community, okay, people coming together and meeting your neighbours and children playing, okay, and the way that these are being designed now is to get people out of their homes, not sitting in there, not in your garden, is getting out there, meeting your neighbours, having more interaction within the community, okay. I think where you're seeing these being located, it falls between the E311 and the E611, which is the Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Road and the Emirates Road, from Al Ain down to Expo City. Now, part of the unhappy part of Dubai at the moment is traffic. Because the roads are so busy, because the population is growing, the car registrations, the SALIC, everything is up. So now we look to see where the planning of Dubai, we've always had everything along Sheikh Zayed Road. Now we're coming inland, and we're looking at the urban plan of 2040. And you've got Silicon Oasis here and Expo City over here. And all these master communities, your work, live, play is now going to be no longer having to come down to the Sheikh Zayed Road and avoid that traffic. So therefore, you're going to get to spend more time in your homes, more time in your communities, more times with the people that matter most.
And this is why you're one of our top salespeople. What a great pitch.
Well, have you got a check for me?
Okay. Mortgage buyers, changing subject.
Yeah.
Mortgages hit a 14-month high last month in Dubai. How does that relate, if at all, to the off-plan market? Because when we talk about payment plans and things like that, you traditionally think, okay, to get involved in the off-plan market, you need to be a cash buyer because you need this cash through the process to be able to afford the property. Is that a fair assumption that people make, or do we see mortgage buyers come into the market?
So if we look at a 50-50 payment plan, even as a non-resident, I can get a mortgage for 50%. I can mortgage the part on handover. So to see the rise in mortgages at the moment there's no coincidence that it's dovetailing in with the handovers.
Yep.
People are coming for a handover. They want to make that final payment to a developer, even in some cases where somebody might have a post-handover payment plan. Rather than taking the 3 years or the 5 years of the post-handover payment plan, whether it's 50 or 40%, they'll go to the bank and say, can I finance this over a 20-year term? So that mortgage increase doesn't surprise me, because and that will continue to be the case, because for a lot of people, they've bought there, they've made the payments during the construction period up to handover, and they will finance it at that stage. And again, we're looking at it. I'm not a mortgage expert, but I think we can get a fixed rate about 4%. And if we look into the future, where a lot of people are saying now, instead of getting a mortgage today, maybe I could manage the payment plan. I have 20% and 4% as if I was buying a ready property. So that's what the most developers are looking for now, 20%, 10%, 20% on booking plus the DLD. Then they say over the next 2-3 years, I can manage the 30%. And instead of what they're also anticipating is that interest rates will fall. So by the time they get their handover to finance that final part, rates will be lower.
Yeah, well, we'd expect so.
Yeah.
Over the next 3-4 years. There's no crystal ball, but we'd certainly expect so. An element of the market that might not be so concerned with mortgages and particularly mortgage rates is the luxury market. So I think Dubai, so far this year, has been ranked the number one market for sales over $10 million.
Yeah.
So where are the hot spots for these properties?
So evidence of that. We're not just kind of here to talk. The company is putting their money where their mouth is and opening up the private office to service that. So that's evidence from from ourselves that there is growth in that segment. I think what we see there is a lot of branded residences. So anything waterfront, your prime locations that have been there. But again, Pam Jebel Ali was resurrected last year. You know, you look at Talal Gaf, and when they moved from, the bread and butter of your townhouses and villas and twin villas into the Alaya, the Elysian, Lanny Island, and the Serenity Mansions. They've gone into that segment, and it's worked. People are absorbing that quality.
Yeah.
Okay, it's no good to just be putting something out there, putting a price tag on it. It has to bring value in these price brackets. Your typical areas, your downtown. We look at down Kempinski, Six Senses down in Dubai Marina. So we're seeing these last plots coming up in downtown. Was H25. There's a banyan tree coming up. Mercedes-Benz. These last remaining plots now in these prime locations that are proven over time where people want to be are very often now having a brand put on them.
And what do you think it is with the brand? Is it okay, that's a banyan tree, I'm going to buy there? Or what's the meaning behind it? So what does banyan tree or any other brand bring to the purchaser?
I suppose for some people there, it's the design element. If we look at Bugatti or Mercedes-Benz, some people are, they're so brand loyal that they will follow that because they know that there's a design element in that. You look at somebody else, then maybe it's the hospitality. You look at downtown St. Regis. When they book their holidays, they will go there, or a Ritz-Carlton. So they know as soon as they go in there, the level of service that they're getting. And again, this is all in the luxury segment. I heard on the radio this morning a new term, and it was ROE, return on ego.
Yeah.
I never heard that term before.
Yeah, but I get it. I like it.
So people are there saying, that within their circle, they're proud to say, where do you live? I live at this tower. I live at Banyan Tree. Oh, people know that straight away, and it fits in with their persona, their ego.
Do you know what? I'll chuck another one at you. ROL, if we're going down this route, return on lifestyle.
Yeah,
and it
100%.
is that people walk into a place and they want to feel like you feel when you walk into a St. Regis. You want to have the facilities that you've got, the sauna, the steam room, the spa facilities, the concierge services, the restaurants. The whole lifestyle element is, I think, what a lot of people are looking for.
They're yearning for that. And the success of the launch of Gaff Woods is prime. Gaff Woods was in an area that was not a proven apartment area. It was a new concept. I don't know one person that I showed that to that said, nah, I don't like that. They were blown away by the whole concept, and they could visualize the lifestyle that it would offer, whether they were an investor or an end user. And I think that's where developers have to be, their focus has to be. Who's going to live in my communities? Are we putting together a package for them that fits in with their lifestyle, that will enhance the quality of their family life?
So you mentioned before about new developers in the market. I think in the last year there's been 45 or over 45 new developers coming into Dubai.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like last year we were, I think was it at the height of last year? It was one launch every 25, 26 hours. Now we're down to 18 hours. If I was to go to my phone now, I'm on over 120, 130 different WhatsApp groups with different developers. And this goes back to that term I mentioned earlier, reputational risk. So we've got new developers coming into the marketplace. They're looking for their position. So how do they get that position when they don't have the pedigree? Well, you've got to make sure now, more than ever, that people that are investing are doing their due diligence. They're not just looking at a location, a payment plan, a price, and thinking that's going to work. Dubai Land Department over the years have put an awful lot of safeguards in place in terms of the escrow account, making sure that they own the land, that there has to be 30 to 50% funding down, or they have to be at a 50% construction before they start selling. So those protections are there. However, the reputational risk is, how do we know this person is going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver? And that's where we come into our own, because our due diligence of going in there, there might be 120 or 130 different developers. 85, 90% I won't sell with for different reasons.
Well, it's not so much, well, that's an interesting point you've made, but the question that was on my lips then is, someone's coming into the market and most buyers are probably not huge million-stroke-billionaires, but people who have worked hard, saved some money, and they own a house and they want to invest in a property. Where do you start with close to 200 developers in the market. How does somebody look at the market and think, okay, this is the direction I need to go in?
So just a caveat to what I said there. I said I wouldn't sell 85 to 90%. And part of that is because I'm very conservative in my approach. If it doesn't tick all the boxes for me, I'll say there's an alternative, better option. This is a developer that's proven. Yes, you might have to pay a premium for that. The starting point before anyone does, you can sit down with the client and get a clear, what are your objectives with this investment? Are you ever going to live there? Is it for short term? Is it for long term? But more importantly, we have got to do our due diligence to make sure that our client's investment ticks all the boxes that they want to achieve. There's been times there I've walked away from a deal because I didn't feel good about it. And the client was adamant, I want to buy this. And I have the philosophy, I won't profit out of somebody else's misfortune. They went to the developer direct. They came back to me several years later. And I think what you're going to find now is, if there's one piece of advice to come out of here, don't go blind. Don't think that you can take all that information and filter it out. It has taken years and hours every week to look at these, go down to the site, look at the progress, to be able to know that when we stand over a developer or a development, that we will be there on the day you get your keys to help you mortgage it, rent it, resell, property management. We're here for the long haul. So the one bit of advice is, how do you filter out all of the developers? Speak to the people that are on the ground.
Speak to an expert.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, let's look ahead to the rest of this year, maybe even into next year. But let's start with this year. What big launches are coming up to put on people's radar?
Okay, so we know there's, in that segment where there's lots of developers, they're going to be in that more affordable areas. That's sub-million, your Arjan, JVC, JVT, Al Farjan, DRC, which is Dubai Residential Complex along the Al Ain Road. The master communities that we want to talk about really are all mainly sitting along that Al Ain Road where Silicon Oasis is, all the way down to Al Maktoum Airport. And, we could look at Emaar. Emaar launched Oasis last year. They're going to be launching now very shortly. The Heights Country Club. Then there's going to be the Grand Polo Club and Resort. Down towards Emaar South. Going inland, you have the Valley Phase 2, which was launched last week. Earlier this year, we had Miras, the Acres, 3, 4 and 5 bed villa communities, Damac Riverside, Aldar that we've mentioned, Haven and Athlon, Majd Al Fatain with Gaff Woods. But we're seeing now this land that filling in where your Victory Heights and your Arabian Ranches and your JGE was. All of that corridor now is being infilled with master communities. And some of these master communities, they're not just townhouse and villas. They're a mix that will have apartments as well. And I like that. I like to think an apartment within a townhouse and villa community, like Alandalus in JGE.
I was going to say, Jumeirah Golf Estate is the perfect example.
And like you said there, people have that lifestyle that when they go in there, where do you live? I can't afford a townhouse or a villa, nor do I need that space. But to be an apartment owner within a gated community like that carries a value and a lifestyle where you've got the clubhouse and all the amenities that are there for the families.
Yeah, 100%. DIFC Square, I wanted to touch about that one. Something on our list that popped out. So it's got here the newest mixed-use development, and the fact it's sold out in a week. So first of all, just to explain to people, what's a mixed-use development?
So a mixed-use development, so if we look at, I suppose there's been very few mixed-use developments coming to the market. And a mixed-use would be where there's an element of office, retail, office, residential. Okay? What we look in DIFC is when everything's happening down towards Expo City and the exhibition centre and the expansion plans for the exhibition centre, the business and the wealth that's coming into Dubai, it's no surprise that we're seeing a lot more activity happening in DIFC. For years, that's pretty much, there hasn't been launches down there. But with the demand that's coming in on the ground of the startups, the businesses, and when we see the caliber of these high net individuals coming into Dubai, they need services. So I wouldn't be surprised when we see DXB is moving to Al Maktoum, the World Trade Center exhibitions will all be held out there, and we'll see DIFC grow further and further and become that financial hub as we head towards 2030 into 2040.
And It sold out in a week. Everything, commercial spaces, residential spaces.
Yeah, commercial, no surprise. I mean, to get office space, it's like hen's teeth. Hen's teeth is an Irish expression. They don't exist. Not that you've ever been looking in a hen's mouth. Maybe a bird's, but anyway, that's different.
So talk quickly on commercial.
Yeah.
Because we've been an advocate for probably about 18 months now. I think 18 months ago we put a podcast out to say there's a bit of a commercial crisis. And what we meant was there's just no commercial properties being built. So is that changing now? Obviously, we just mentioned the ones in the IFC, but are developers anywhere else building office space, commercial space?
Well, we look at Expo City. Expo City is the city of the future. You know, the government of Dubai have pumped $7 million in there. I was out there with clients yesterday in from the America, and we looked at Gaff Woods as well. And they're blown away by these communities. And they've been around the world, they've seen lots of different things. But when you go down there, there's a city that Siemens, DP World, they're all beginning to start operations in. I was in some of the pavilions, and the offices are there ready to be occupied. So that's going to be one of the most vibrant communities. Silicon Oasis. The blue metro line is coming up to Silicon Oasis. Silicon Oasis has always been, you know, important for Expo City. It's not just freehold, but it's a free zone as well.
Yeah.
You've got Logistic City, you've got Jebel Ali Port, Al Maktoum Airport. So that's going to be a really hotbed down there. Equally so, trying to pull some of the traffic off the roads. Silicon Oasis on the 311, by the Allain Road as well. The blue metro line, as I said, was coming in there. Let's see that there'll be a lot more office space coming out there. So we're moving away from the DIFC, we're moving away from the JLT, the Business Bay, the downtown, to bring some of that out here, take the traffic off the road, and give people more time to enjoy the lifestyle that Dubai offers.
Yeah, I think you've made a key point there. It requires that public transport service for large office spaces and large office hubs, because with the best will in the world, if you haven't got public transport to get there, you're never going to attract a large people and businesses on a large scale.
Well,
okay,
wasn't there this week here? There was the announcement that they're doubling down on the metro stations across Dubai,
which is perfect.
And again, that ties in with you go down Hessa Street and Sakim, and these were bottlenecks. The upgrades of the roads are already happening in front of your eyes, and you're like going, okay, that wasn't there last week. So
I rudely interrupted you then, finishing off your sentence.
That's okay.
I was going to finish up on, we're not here to blow smoke into the market and say, you know, Dubai's going to keep growing, it'll never fail, et cetera, because as with any property market, it is going to be cyclical, and at some point there will be some cool off. But do you see any headwinds on the horizon at the moment?
I see segments of the market that are at risk. And I've been saying this for a while. Some of the product that's coming into the market with these European and international developers, they're bringing a different standard. You know, like 9 years ago was Ellington. Then you had your Iman. So these private developers that are now setting a new benchmark. When these international developers are coming in, that's going to be a better product. My concern would be for the older buildings that lack amenities, aren't well maintained, because when the new shiny building comes along, that's going to be filled first. And yes, the new people coming into Dubai is going to absorb that. But when the plateaus and the supply does come in this midsection, I think you're going to see occupancy drop in these older buildings, periods of vacancy increase, and as a landlord, you're left with one thing to do, and that's reduce your rent, increase the number of checks. And then these buildings are at risk of a different demographic. And ultimately, that'll affect the capital value. So there are segments there that need to be, you know, let the buyer beware, but let them do their homework. And let's not just go in and think about, that's a great price, that's my ROI today. ROI without occupancy, for me, doesn't work.
So that's a great pitch to buy off-plan rather than secondary. But specifically in the off-plan market, and I'm not saying there are any, I just want to give people, I just want to ask the question, because there will be people out there who think, okay, it sounds great at the moment, but is there a blip on the horizon?
I think, listen, you're going to have a plateau at some stage, because your off-plan market is going to have to contend with the same type of product that's handing over. So you got a new product today that's handing over that I can get a mortgage on versus off-plan. But over the years that I've been here, we've always seen the pendulum swing from ready to off-plan. And the one thing that developers have up their sleeves, post-handover payment plan. DLD waiver, service fee waivers. So when we see that happening, that's when we know there's kind of a little bit of a softening. So they're the things to be looking out for.
But at the same time, that's a huge buying signal for some people, because we've been through this before. And we mentioned the land list at Jumeirah Golf Estates 3 or 4 years ago. The payment plans were superb.
Incredible.
And they sold out in what we would call a more, this was pre-COVID, a more downward market, let's put it that way. But they sold out so quickly because the payment plan was so good.
You go back to people now that are buying today, and you go back to Cherrywoods. When clients bought with me in Cherrywoods, 50% down on a 3-bed townhouse for 1.625, 1.629. They paid 50%, got their keys, and 50% post-handover. Those days will come again. Now, I'm not saying that might not happen for another 2-3 years, but the developers, that's the ace up a developer's sleeve.
And that'll keep the market driving.
And when that happens again, this time round, I'm not going to hesitate.
No, because you're making all your money now. So you're well prepared.
Yeah, spending it is quick. School fees, you know yourself, PK.
Yeah, oh no. Good. Fintan, thank you. Great
Most
podcast.
welcome.
Hopefully people have taken away some key bits of knowledge, some interesting facts about the market, some of your insights for going forward. As always, if anyone has any questions, anything you want us to clarify, any comments to make, etc., please drop a note in the comments. Please follow us and subscribe in all the usual places, and we'll see you again soon.